And I'm a proud member of Jewish National Fund's Women for Israel and a member of their High Society. I'm pleased that so many of our friends are able to join us today. And this afternoon, Shelly Gerson, my event co-chair, and I have an exciting program planned for you, which really brings to life the founding of the State of Israel, as well as the importance of preserving our heritage for generations to come. We want to be mindful of those of you who are joining us midday from your places of business. So without further delay, I'm going to let Shelly start the program.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shelly Gerson, and I'm a proud member of Women for Israel, as well as a member of the Century Society. Both my parents came from strong Zionist homes, and my commitment to the newly created State of Israel extends back to September 1949, when my grandfather, Ayal Shor, made preparations to resettle in the newly created State of Israel. Unfortunately, he died several days before he was set to sail. But the strong Zionist fervor remained in my father's heart as he continued to support Jewish National Fund, buy Israeli bonds, and help out in any way he could, as well as returning to Israel several times. My mother also is a strong supporter of Israel. At a very early age, she and her friends in Covington, Kentucky neighborhood planted a garden in her backyard, following JNF's mission to become Jewish pioneers to reclaim and resettle Eretz Israel. Today, Jewish National Fund continues the work of building the land, focusing on 7 key area actions: community development, research and development, forestry and green innovations, water solutions, disability and special needs, Zionist education, and today's focus, preservation of heritage sites. We hope that as you hear our speakers this afternoon, you will be inspired to join us in continuing the work of building the land by preserving these sites. Any donation made today will be designated to this initiative. We also have different levels of giving. So you can join as a Women for Israel Alliance, which is $360, or as Linda has joined, the High Society for $1,800 annually, or as I have, for the Sapphire Society, which is a $5,000 contribution annually. Contributions of any amount are welcome. However, donations at these levels provide women with special programming. Now, Linda will introduce our guest speaker. Unmute yourself, Linda.
Thank you, Shelly. As the Executive Vice-Chairman of the Society for Preservation of Israel Heritage Sites, SPIHS, an esteemed Jewish National Fund partner, Noa Gefen is instrumental in restoring, preserving, and maintaining vital historical and heritage sites throughout Israel. Under her stewardship, SPIHS undertakes new restoration and preservation projects every year. Sites include Ayalon Institute, an underground bullet factory during Mandatory Palestine, Atlit Detention Camp, where the clandestine immigrants from Europe, as well as Arab countries, were detained before the establishment of Israel, Old Nitzanim Women of Valor Center, and Yellen House. Noa previously served as a training manager at Stanford University and as a training and development manager at Israel's largest logistics company, Bar Group. Noa, please take it away.
Okay, shalom everybody. Eric, if you can please share our presentation. That's Wonderful. Here we go. We have it. Of course, shalom again. It's wonderful, wonderful to be with you today. And I would like first to thank everybody who invited us to participate and made such a great effort to make this program so wonderful. So I want to thank Shelly, of course, and Linda, and Evie, and Alana, Eric, of course, and Yarden. And it's great, so many familiar faces and old friends here, Barbara and Nina, and I see even Courtney. I miss you, my friend, so much. Today, we're going to speak about one of the action area of JNF here in Israel, but one that is very close to my heart and very important one. And this is, of course, our beautiful heritage sites here in Israel. Not talking about old history. We are talking about the heritage very much connected to the Zionist movement and to the rebirth time of Israel. And this is going to be the focus of today. Eric, if you can please go to the next slide. When we talk about our heritage, we can talk about, of course, museums, we can speak about buildings or compounds. But for me, when I think about our heritage, it's mostly about our personal stories. Shelly, you so beautifully shared earlier your story, and I believe each one of us has some sort of a personal connection to our heritage. It's our grandparents' generation and our parents' generation who built this beautiful country for us. And we owe them so much. And I would like to share with you a little bit about my own personal story. In the picture here, you can see next to Ben Gurion, you can see Eliyahu Dobkin. My grandfather. He was the head of the department of the Jewish Agency for many years. He was to bring hundreds and thousands of Jews to the land of Israel. He was also a signatory of the Declaration of Independence, and you can see his signature here in the document in the slide. My father, my late father, Yehuda Dekel, was actually one of the founders of the Society for Preservation, and he was the chairman for many years. So I guess for me, heritage is much more than just building and sites. It's my own personal story. If, please, Eric, let's go to the next slide and talk a little bit how everything started. People here in Israel were very busy in developing and creating this new country for us. But in the mad rush for growth and development, so many important buildings and sites were torn down. So we called them the Group of Michiganders. And in response to what took place, with this idea and with the notion that we need to do something about it, and they started the Society for Preservation of Israel Heritage Sites. The organization started back in 1984, and since then, SPICE is dedicated to locating, restoring, and preserving sites all over Israel, from the Galilee to the Negev, from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. And I'm very proud to say that with JNF of USA, we've managed to preserve more than 200 sites all over the country for visitors. Today, we are going to highlight one site and one very heroic story. And this is, of course, the story of Nebi Yusha and the Korach fortress. And we have a very, very important and a dear friend here with us tonight, or actually this afternoon, to share his story. Here in the picture, we see a very special, dear group of people. This is the Daphna Palmach group. Among them were also my parents, Yehuda and Nechama. Here in the middle, you can see Nechama. She's in the blue circle in the middle. She is still alive, and like Amnon, she's 91 years old. She lives like just 5 minutes from me, and I'm so lucky to have her around. My father, unfortunately, already passed away. And Amnon, I'm not sure where are you exactly, you are in the picture, but maybe you can point and say where are you in the picture?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't do it on my iPad.
You're in there. You're in there.
I can't hear it.
I hear you.
Okay, and anyhow, Amnon is part of that group as well.
I'll tell you where I am. I am,
Okay, please do.
with this picture, Noah, I'm
Yeah.
already past the hospital.
Really?
The picture was taken after I was wounded. Yes.
Ah, wow, I didn't know that. I thought that's an earlier picture, but that's, you know, you learn something new every day, Amnon.
Yeah.
This is the way it is. Eric, if you can please go to the next picture. You can see some pictures of Nebi Yusha. This is the historic name of the place that we are going to highlight today. In the left-hand side is historic a picture of the fortress. In the right-hand side, this is the way the fortress looks like today. Let's go to the next slide as well. And where we can get an understanding of which area are we talking about. So we are in the Upper Galilee. The Upper Galilee, of course, is in the northern part of Israel. The fortress that we are going to talk in the next few minutes is a very important location, not so far from the Lebanon border and from Syria. And it's overlooking, if you can see from the pictures, it's overlooking Hachula Valley and also heights. It has a point of, it's a looking point over most of the important access ways of the Galilee. So this place is very, very important. Let's go to the next slide and learn a little bit about the story of the place. So the Koach fortress, this is the name that was given to the place after the war. So Nebi Yusha was the original name. It was actually a fortress in Upper Galilee that was by the British in order to protect the Lebanon border. When the British decided that they are going to leave Palestine, what they did is that they actually literally handed the keys of that fortress, the control of that fortress, to the local Arab. So Palmach and the Haganah, among them Amnon and his friends, then they knew that they need to do something right away. So they started to protect this area, and a series of 3 battles took place. One of them, the second one, was mostly, I think, the most famous one. And unfortunately, 28 Palmach heroes lost their lives in the battle for our independence in the Upper Galilee. It was in 2014 when SPICE, the Society for Preservation, together with JNF, opened the museum, Hariut Museum, or the Friendship Museum, next to the fortress. Let's please go to the next slide, where we can see some more pictures of the museum, the way it looks like today. This is a picture from the outside, just an example of the kind of groups that are coming for visit. Let's see another picture in the next slide. When we can learn a little bit about the way the museum looks from the inside. It's a very emotional place, tell the heroic story of the battle for the Galilee during the War of Independence in 1948. Eric, if you can please go to the next slide. I would like now to introduce a very dear friend of mine. I would like to introduce an Israeli hero, Amnon ben Yehuda. Amnon is a dear friend of mine, a very dear friend of my family. He was born in 1929, Tel Aviv. And like many other people in his age, joined the Palmach in 1947 and was stationed in Daphna, Kibbutz Daphna, together with my parents, with Nechama and Yehuda. In April 20th, 1948, Amnon participated in the battle for the Nebi Yusha fortress, and he was shot in his head. He was rescued from the field by a very heroic effort by his friend. His survival and recovery were a true miracle. Something that I think up until today, it's a story that sometimes it's unbelievable to even to imagine that it really took place. After spending a year of recovery, Amnon decided to leave to America and he went to school. He spent 30 years in the computer industry. He had a very long and very nice career. He retired in 1985 and spent many, many years since then dedicating his life to commemorate his. Amnon wrote a book about this matter, and he published articles, he even wrote a song. Important, together with my late father, who together established the museum in the Upper Galilee, what we call today Hariut Museum. Amnon, thank you for joining us today, and please take the floor to hear your story.
All right, thank you, Noah. Yeah, this is emotional. You bring me back to those days. I was a friend with your father, your late father, from the 6th grade in elementary school, and we were in the Scouts movement together. Well, all of us. Let me explain to you. We were a bonded group. They grew up together before we went to the Palmach. So unlike regular army and all that, where strangers get together and become a unit, we were already bonded from childhood, literally, and from living together in the same neighborhood and being together in the Scouts movement, and being educated to, as we grow up, to find serve time in the Palmach, that was an objective, and then form a new kibbutz, found a new kibbutz, which our boys actually did. And we have a kibbutz on the border, on the Lebanese border, was founded by our guys. So that's important that you understand what kind of group we were. That's a very important part of the story here. And by the way, I'm going to speak for about 10-15 minutes or so, and then there's time for questions. All right. In this action, trying to capture for the fortress, we lost 12 of our boys from the Achshara. We lost 12 brothers. The interesting thing about it is that when the bodies were found later, after a month later, when the place was captured by our guys, the bodies were found in pairs, which means a fellow was wounded and his buddy was trying to save him, and then both of them lost their lives. And this is how the guys kept losing their lives trying to save their buddies. And that is the most powerful thing, most powerful story to remember. I was rescued by my friends, and I've been carrying that burden on me. Why me? Why was I who survived for the rest of my life? And what happened? So let me tell you now what happened. And everything I'm telling you now is what I learned years later. because when I was shot in my head, I've got a shot right here, I fell into coma, and I was in coma for about 8 days. And the first time I woke up, I was already in a hospital after surgery and all that stuff. 8 days, just they didn't know what happened in my life. And it took me many years to find out what happened. It didn't just happen overnight, because we were very reluctant to talk about it. The pain was so deep. So here's my story. When I got shot, that was about 4 o'clock in the morning. This was a night operation. My recruits, I was a squad leader, thought that I was dead. And they didn't think about rescuing me. These were fresh recruits that just arrived in the Galilee, and I took command over them a day earlier. I didn't even have a chance to learn their names and to train them at all. Fortunately, one of my friends passed by. They were removing the machine guns from there. Aronchik. He saw me. Who was Aronchik? He was my friend from age 4. We were in kindergarten together, and then we grew up together. We were in school together. We were in the Scouts movement together. He passed by and he sees me, and he made sure that I would be rescued. And I was carried out to a settlement, Ramot Neftali, about a mile or 2 away, and left there, because the guys didn't think they could carry me down the mountain about 2,000 feet. So they just let me there in a small clinic that they had. Clinic. It's just a place for first aid place. Fortunately, there were 2 angels there, ladies, great ladies, young great ladies. They took on the job of keeping me alive around the clock by using damp rags and dropping drops of water into my lip and mouth to keep me hydrated. There was nothing else they could do. They didn't have anything else available to them. But just by hydrating me around the clock, they were able to keep me going for about 48 hours. Then our groups came up the mountain again with fresh supplies for this place, and with a plan to evacuate the 9 children that were living there. They found me alive. They didn't know what to do. They didn't think they could carry me down the mountain at night successfully. That not on the road. That means mountain climbing, a mountain going down at night. Well, they finally decided they'll try. They tied me up to a stretcher, and 8 fellows carried me down. God bless them. And got me to a kibbutz, Ayelet Shachar, and there, finally, I was transported from there to a Beilinson hospital near Tel Aviv. Now, what happens in Beilinson hospital? Now, I was wounded, was early Tuesday morning, about 4 o'clock. By the time I arrived at the hospital, it was Friday morning, Erev Pesach. The Leila Seder was on that evening. Who is there? Professor Harden Ashkenazi, who just arrived in the country as a Holocaust survivor from Romania. In the late 30s, he was already trained in neurosurgery in the finest universities on the East Coast of the United States. He went back to Romania and became the chief surgeon of the big hospital in Bucharest, and then ended up as a survivor and enriched Israel, and I'm waiting for him as a patient. Right? So I had a good surgeon waiting for me. And he worked with me for 6 hours. And at the end of surgery, he basically opened up my head completely here and cleaned up whatever it did. And put back the skin. So I had skin over brain, no skull. It's about 4x4. And it gave me 0.5, that's 0.5% chance of making it. 0.5. And I fooled them all. In 17 days, I walked out of that hospital. 17 days. Now, what happened to me when I woke up? I found the right side of my body was paralyzed. You know, just a case, like a severe case of stroke. The hit was on the left, and the right side of the body was paralyzed. Also, for a while, I could not talk. My brain was very clear, but I knew what I wanted to say, but I could not get the voice out. My sight was okay. I lost it earlier, but it came back very quickly. So now I'm on a task. Well, I spent a month in what they call a rehab or a rest home. And then I was lucky to have a wonderful home to go to in Tel Aviv with my parents, loving parents, who gave me a place to be with love and all the support I needed, with no worries to think at all. So now I was on my own program now. I said to myself, I am going to recover to be as healthy as I can and go back to my unit. That was my project. And I began a rehab program. I said to myself, I'm not going to become a lefty. I'm going to retrain my right side, whatever it takes. It turns out that many of the things I did then are considered today great stuff in brain recovery situations. First, I said to myself, I want to be able to write with my right hand again, not with my left. So I put a pen, I sat down, I put a pencil in my hand, and went like this, and I began to just draw and make lines and then squares, and cubes or squares and circles. Ultimately began to write letters until I was able to actually write letters and write words. I also forced myself to learn to use the fork and knife with the right hand rather than use everything with the left. And I'm giving it to you in very short. If you're interested, you see my book. I detailed everything very clearly in my book. And my book, by the way, is not just about my physical recovery, but my emotional. And that to me was even more important than the physical. So I had a complete program. Now, all my life, since age 6, I was studying and learning the violin. There's no way I could use the bow. So I said, okay, I bought myself an accordion. I said, this would be a good exercise, you know, just with the fingers on a keyboard. I bought an accordion, took lessons for a couple of months just to understand the structure of the accordion. And I was practicing every day for a couple of hours. I bought myself a small library of chess books. Well, the idea was I want to make sure that my brain doesn't go to sleep, that my brain is up to snuff. And I was going through replaying competitive games and learning them and studying them. I spent time doing that. I exercised. I just been doing the push-ups and calisthenics. Probably the most important thing I was doing is we had a large mirror in the entryway. So I stand in front of the mirror and I said to myself, my left side will teach the right side. So I would stand in front of the mirror and I say, I'm going to do dancing motions, but make sure that everything is symmetrical. My eyes control it. See? Simple. Go like this, like this. For you, it's normal. It's natural. For me, it was an effort. I had to do, not just doing like this was an effort, make sure that it is symmetrical. And I was doing it. It turns out that this is a great exercise. Today they recommend it because it rebuilds brain cells. It took me about a year and I was ready to go. I'm fine, but no, there's no way I could go back to the military with a big hole in my head. I developed also a very close relationship with my surgeon, Dr. Ashkenazi. He was like my second father. And he recommended that I go to school. I wanted to go to a university. He recommended that I go abroad, that I do not stay in Israel. And at the time, I didn't understand why he was doing it. And later on, many years later, I realized he understood that I was suffering with PTSD. And I needed to get away. And it took me many, many years to accept it for myself that I had really suffered from PTSD and be suffering. So this is the emotional side, the second part of my recovery that I want to talk briefly about. I had a wonderful career. I met a wonderful lady, married her in Berkeley while we were going to school. And she's been a wonderful help to me. And we had a wonderful life. We're going to celebrate our 70th anniversary in June, this coming June. And we had 2 children. I had a successful career in the computer field, but I reached a point where I could not function anymore because the ghosts were chasing me. I had, dreams, bad dreams that were haunting me, and I had flashbacks, unexpected. All of a sudden, flashback would hit me just any time. But ultimately, it reached a point where my energy was beginning to come down because I could not sustain myself. And I realized I was in a crisis. So at that point, I yielded my manhood and went to see a counselor. Okay, that's the breaking point for a man. And I went to see a counselor, and I ended up working with him for a whole year, twice a week, and that's all I was doing for 1 year. I did not do anything else. That's all I was doing. Only 1 year in counseling exclusively. Thank goodness, it saved my life. And when I came out of it, that was like 1966, 67. I made a decision that I was not going to go to work anymore because I figured I think I have enough to carry us, and I don't want to sell myself to the money. I want to do in my life things that are important. And I've been a member of the Rotary Club in San Diego for over 40 years, and we're doing a lot of community service work. I just give. I give back. Whatever I give back, and I give back not from the fat. I give back from the meat. So then came what I call the great opportunity, the important one. 1988. We were going to have the 40th anniversary of the battle. We are going to have the memorial at Nebi Yusha, which, by the way, every year there is a major memorial event there. And I said to myself, I'm going to go back on the 40th, and I'm not only be there, I'm going to deliver a eulogy. And I did. I would like, if we have the time, I will read you, give you the eulogy. It was, pardon me. Yeah, I'm sorry. It was in the still of the night 40 years ago. Like lions, we climbed this mountaintop, hopes in our hearts, and the guns ready to go. With your blood and death, my friends, you have consecrated this earth and made us all into one, blessed with the gift of love, known only to those who'd rather die than leave a friend behind. And when the bullet hit my head, it was so quick. For a moment, I thought it was just a rock or perhaps a mule's kick. But then instantly, I was so helpless, floating and sinking into the dark abyss. And I knew, bullet, head, this is it. Surprise, it's almost painless. And I wept within, too bad, still a virgin, so young. Farewell, father, mother, and friends. And the air kept flowing out of my lungs. And suddenly, I was awake. Yes, it was after 8 days. Glad and surprised to be alive. But the voice has been haunting me ever since. Why me and not them? Why was it I who survived? And when I regained some speech and strength, I whispered slowly, how soon before I can go back to the field? And the doctor smiled, bent over me and said, for you, young man, the war is over. Just be glad that you were not killed. Little did he know, this wonderful man, that he left my heart broken with deep, deep pain. My soul is scarred, filled with doubts. I survived. I failed. I did not do enough. Tell me, mother, where did I go wrong? Was it supposed to be real tough? It is here in this presence, 40 years later, that I speak of my nightmares, the unfinished battles, because it was only you, my friends, who are still living, who carried on the burden and horrors of doing more battles. Today, in the presence of this grave, I'm expressing my gratitude and love to all those, and many I still do not know, who risked their lives to pull me out, dead or alive.
Amnon, this is so beautiful. It's so
Thank you.
beautiful. I know that it's not the first time I hear it, but every time I hear you speak, it's
Well,
so beautiful.
For me, it was an immense relief, but more important, so many of my buddies, my friends, were all keeping things in their bellies, came to me. It was the beginning, it was the beginning, a new beginning for my friends. And the good, beautiful things began to happen after that. And that's a whole new chapter of my life that I'm not going to talk about here, but it's in my book. And I'm free. I talk freely about everything now. And that was, you have to go through all this. And I'm trying to encourage my buddies, my friends, to also come along. And this thing happened, this thing ended up with a movie now. There is a documentary that was produced by one of our guys about the Battle of Nebi Yusha. I composed some music for the documentary and all kinds of other beautiful things. So, once you break through, life becomes so much beautiful and more open, and that's the key. And what's important about this museum in this place, it become a place where, for the young set in Israel and for the military young military guys, this is our ethos. We do not leave anybody behind. That's the ethos, and that's the key. And this is why we call it, this is the Brotherhood Museum. We do not leave anybody behind. And you should see the groups of young military recruits come through the museum and getting lectures and getting things and learning all about it. And so that gives me a good feeling. At least no, I could not go back to the field, but if I could contribute by giving of my soul, of myself, in with ideas, that's good enough.
What an incredible story, Amnon. Looking forward to reading your book. I put it in the chat. For those of you that want to look in your chat, you'll see the name of the book. I'll also send it in an email that I sent out to all of you tomorrow. And there's an article I want to send to you as well. Does anybody have any questions at this time? If you do, please raise your hand, unmute yourself. I think there's one question in the chat right now that I could ask you. And Shelly asked this question before, but I'm going to ask it. I'm going to ask it now. Have any others sought you out based on your book, Healing the Wounds of War, Heroes to Heroes? Have you worked with them before?
I'm sorry. I cannot hear you clearly. Say it again.
So, based on your book, have you ever worked with Heroes to Heroes in Israel? It's a JNF program right now.
No.
No. Okay.
No.
Where there's a couple other questions here too. So there's where are you living right now? Is San Diego correct?
Yes, I'm in San Diego.
Okay.
And at the moment, as I mentioned, I live alone now because my wife came down with a mild cognitive issue. So she's in a special place and wonderful place, actually, in our neighborhood here. And she's getting great care. And so that's where we are now.
What's the name of your, there's another question here. What's the name of the documentary that you were talking about?
Well, the documentary is Lo Eshkach Zot Re'i, I Will Not Forget You. And it's when you look at the book in the back, on the back of the book, and actually inside also, there is direct link to it. Also, you can link to it, just Google my name, Amnon Ben Yehuda, and then say Vimeo, Amnon Ben Yehuda at Vimeo, and you can get to the documentary. And it's both in Hebrew and in English. I converted it myself. I did a conversion from Hebrew to English.
Yeah, then I believe we have the link for it, right? We can send the.
Yep, I will definitely send that out tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Another question on here is, have you been back to Israel before 1988?
I have. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And those have been some amazing visits. I had a visit in 67, after the 67 war, I made a visit. And I visited of course, I went to visit the Biusha. And it was the most spiritual experience that I could think of. Unbelievable. And again, I've described it in the book. The place, if you have a moment, I'll tell you. I walked in, I came in and there's a sentry outside. And I simply said to him, I'd like to see the commander. And he said, okay. So he looked at me and said, okay. The commander comes out and I said to him, I fought here. No, I'm sorry. I did not say that. I just said, my name is Amnon Ben Yehuda and I'd like to visit the fortress. He looked at me up and down, like that. He said, follow me. And it was a very hot day, remember? And I carried a large movie camera. My idea was to go up to the roof and take pictures, movies of the areas where I was when I was shooting at the fortress. he said to me, and to climb up to the roof, you just have to go up a straight ladder, like in a fire station. There are no steps, you know. You climb a ladder. He said to me, "Let me carry your camera," he said to me. Well, okay. And so we get to the roof, and at that point, he said to me, "I'll tell you what, I'll leave you here alone. You can stay here all you want, and then call me when you come down." Okay. I stood there. I started taking the camera out of the case. Those days it was a film camera. And I started taking it out of the case, and I could not do it. I could not take the camera out of the case to take the pictures. I just let it go. I didn't fight it. I just stood there and I looked and I looked and I cried, and I was crying. I was crying. You know, the pain coming out of that kind of situation, the disappointment, we were, and the loss of so many good friends. And actually, I believe it affected all of us. Every member of our group was affected in some sort of a PTSD. And our group has remained bonded throughout our lives. After the Palmach, after the war and all that, getting together like on what's like a weekly basis. I would travel when I come back to Israel. Okay, when are we getting together? Boom, and I get together with the guys. And then there were also annual get-togethers for the entire group. Amazing! It's just an amazing experience.
Now we have a time for, I think there's one or two more questions here. Have you shared your stories to your grandchildren and children?
Yes, yes. In fact, and it's shared that the reason I wrote the book was that I had to get it out of me to others, to the world. So it shared it and my children, and of course, particularly my daughter is very emotional about it, and the same in my grandchildren too. They need to know. Everybody needs to know. I wrote the book and I have the introduction, just the introduction page, very brief. I said, I've been through this difficult process. I've been through it. I know I must share. I want to share it because I know most of my colleagues, any soldier, they just don't do it. They carry their secrets and pain with them to the grave. So, I feel it's a duty for me to speak about it.
Well, we really, really appreciate you opening up to us, sharing your story. Very heartfelt, and it was amazing to have you on. We're gonna close this up, but I will save this video. I'll send it out to everyone. It's just if you have a chance to look at the book and buy the book, I will send out the link again. But we appreciate you being here and telling your story and opening up to us as a JNF WFI group. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Okay, Shelly, you are on. Let me mute myself and
Thank you, Noah and Amnon. Noah so well described the preservation of the historic sites in Israel, and it provides an opportunity for all of us to share these and other stories with our children and our grandchildren, so that we will never forget what was sacrificed by Amnon and Noah's parents and all the other 48, 67, 73, on and on wars that have been part of poor Israel's existence as a state in the modern world. Additionally, the building of a facility such as the Brotherhood Museum in the Upper Galilee furthers the economic development in this area by providing employment as well as tourist opportunities. The battle that Amnon described embodies the Israeli practice of never leaving our people behind and of being responsible for one another, which is also a very Jewish value. This is indeed the Jewish National Fund's vision and purpose, that we are responsible for our brothers and sisters in Israel. Let me remind you that donations made today to JNF can be designated specifically for the Historical Preservation Action Area and directly to this museum, which I've been to, and it is an amazing, amazing museum, wonderful video, wonderful story, recreating the battles that Amnon is talking about. I would like to thank my co-host and cousin, Linda Greenberg, Eric Goldstein, the Executive Director of the Ohio Valley Jewish National Fund, as well as Evie Margolin and my daughter, Alana Gerson-Levy, co-chairs of the Ohio Valley Women for Israel, work on this and many other programs. In the meantime, everybody online, go to the Jewish National Fund website, jnf.org, and join other virtual tours of Israel under the heading Visit Israel. Can't be easier. And there's also a JNF Ohio Valley virtual culinary tour being offered March 15th to the 19th. So think about joining that one. This is our second JNF culinary tour. So again, thank you all for joining us and hope to see you on another JNF virtual tour. And hopefully, Baruch Hashem, we all get to come in October for the JNF convention in Israel, celebrating, now it's going to be 71 years, I think, correct? Okay, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Noah. Thank you,
Thank
Amnon.
you, Noah. Thank you, Amnon.
Thank you so much again. It was wonderful seeing everybody. And we're waiting for you here in Israel.
Can't wait.
We're waiting to come.
You know it.
No bidud, no quarantine. We're there.
We'll try.
Hope to see you soon.
Do our best.
תודה רבה לך.